Hi, this is Mark Littleton, the minister of the Word for the Athens Church of Christ, with today's 3-minute sermon. This week we're focusing on one of my favorite passages in all of the Bible. It's found in Romans 8 and verse 28, where a man by the name of Paul wrote these words. He said, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." What Paul is saying in that passage is profound. He is not saying that everything that happens to us in this life is good. I mean, there are things that happen that are bad. But what Paul is saying is, even in the midst of those things that are not good, God can work for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. Paul not only wrote that by inspiration of the Holy Spirit of God, Paul experienced that in his own life. You see, Paul spent a great deal of time in a Roman prison cell for no other reason than he was telling people about Jesus, and he was arrested and put in prison. There's nothing about being thrown in prison for telling people about Jesus that looks good or that is good. You would think, man, that is just horrible. What good could possibly come out of being thrown in prison for telling people about Jesus? Well, it was during those years that Paul sat in a prison cell that he wrote half of the New Testament that we are benefiting from when we read it today. And so Paul knew God can take a situation that's bad and He can work it for good. And so what we're doing this week is every day we're thinking about some ways that right now in the midst of this current crisis in our nation that is anything but good, all right? It's bad. But yet in the midst of that, there are some good things that are happening. There are some good things that God may be doing in our lives and certainly is doing in our world. And so we're focusing on some of those things each day this week. The one I want you to think about with me today is this. I think one thing good that's coming out of all this is that we are beginning to be weaned away from the idea and the illusion that somehow we are in control of our lives. We kind of fall into that pattern, right, where we make our plans, things happen exactly like we planned, and in our mind we get the idea, hey, I really am in control of my life. Things like this remind us we're not in control at all. And the illusion that we are begins to go up in smoke. Instead of thinking that we're in control, things like this current crisis remind us we are completely dependent on our God. Reminds me of a passage in the book of James, in James chapter 4, beginning down in verse 13. James writes these words. I want to share them with you today. He says, "Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow, we're going to go to this city, spend a year there, and carry on business and make money." I mean, we've got our plans, right? James says, "Why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that." Friend, you and I are not in control. If you thought you were, I hope this has reminded you, you are not. God is still in control, and we are completely dependent upon Him. And I think it's a good thing that this current crisis is reminding us we need God. Lord willing, we'll see you again tomorrow, where I'll share another good thing that I think this crisis is doing in our lives on our 3-minute sermon. God bless.